Hello and welcome to ESDES Evening News, and it's Diana and Caitlin again. Tonight, in our studio, we will cover the horrendous Enron Scandal that took place in 2001.
Tonight, we will see two experts in their field analyze and discuss the Enron Scandal with Jeffrey Skilling himself. First of all, can you please describe to our viewers who may not know much about the situation what Enron is?
Yes, of course. 17 years ago, Enron Corporation was a thriving American oil company based in Houston, Texas. In 2001, we covered the breaking news of an embezzlement scandal.
In 2001, Enron, the seventh largest U.S. corporation, collapsed and produced the largest corporate bankruptcy to date in U.S. history, as well as the biggest audit failure of all time. First, bosses created and implemented business ideas that led to major problems which could not be legally or ethically fixed, resulting in their downfall. They created a sort of asset-light version of their company by applying their trading and management skills to power plants and other facilities, leaving Enron with a liability of over $5 billion in debt.
That's awful. Some key dates include 1995, Enron named America's most innovative company by Fortune 6 consecutive years. Can you imagine?
They were doing so well.
Yes, 1998, Andrew Fastow, promoted CFO, spearheads the creation of companies that help hide Enron's losses.
Scandalous.
But in October 2001, scandal revealed.
Shit hit the fan. Not good. Let's tune in to Ellie in the newsroom, where she will be speaking with the three men. Ellie?
She's ready.
Hello. Today, we have the privilege to talk to not one, but three men with expert knowledge on the Enron scandal and the HR issues that allowed the embezzlement to happen. I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Skilling, the CEO of Enron, who is able to talk with us today because he's recently been released on parole. Professor Antoine, a professor in ethics and specialist in the Enron scandal, and Mr. Taupin, an HR specialist. Hello, gentlemen, and thank you for being here today.
Hello.
To start off, Mr. Skilling, I would like to have your perspective on the fall of Enron and why you choose to plead innocent despite the numerous forms of proof contrary to that and the many other executives who plead the fifth.
Well, first, I'd like to start by thanking you for having me here and allowing me to share my side of the story. So the reason I have remained so strong in my plea is because since the event is... the reason I have remained so strong in my plea for innocence since the event is because I truly had no idea that anything improper was going on, and I was and I am devastated by what Enron has come to represent.
So you're saying that you had no idea whatsoever that there were embezzlement deals, despite the fact that you had your hands in every aspect of the company. There were multiple lower-level whistleblowers talking about scandal, and you happened to make a convenient exit 4 months before the scandal hit.
Well, when I left the company, I was confident that the company was doing well and in terms of profitability and morality, but I had no clue of what was to come. It was just a case of a couple bad eggs. It was not involved or knowledgeable about fraud deals.
Thank you, Mr. Skilling, for sharing your side of the story. And now I would like to hear from Professor Antoine and Mr. Taupin. What are your views from the ethical and HR standpoint on what went wrong at Enron?
From the ethical perspective, I studied this case really deeply, and the problem that led Enron to fall was there was nearly no integrity capacity in the company. So when the managers gave into greed and decided to take advantage of the situation by reporting the result that they wanted to see for the company. They were abandoning the basic concepts and moral concepts that was the basic of Enron before this scandal.
And what is integrity capacity for our viewers?
So the integrity capacity is the alignment of moral awareness and conduct that promote supportive systems for moral decision making. So without it, the reputation capital begins to erode and creates managemental disrupt, and stakeholders can become upset. This is what lost really the company Enron, and they lose all their credibility, and it leads to this terrible scandal.
Actually, I couldn't be more agree with what you said. The human resources managers of Enron allowed for this poisonous unethical culture to develop, and that created the perfect atmosphere for embezzlements. They shouldn't have been more aware. They should have been more aware of and created a system and an environment that encourage the common good over personal greed.
Very interesting. And what do you gentlemen think it says when all of the individuals that were accused plead the fifth in their congressional hearings about managerial, immoral, and illegal conduct?
Yeah, the top Enron executives pleading the fifth in hearings is a vivid example of the consequences of the neglect of individual and organizational integrity capacity on the HR's part.
Thank you, gentlemen. And now, back to Caitlin and Deanna.
Thanks, Ellie. And now we're gonna have a deeper look into the subject, and we have a real interview with the real HR manager, Hazel Tilinsky.
Hazel Tilinsky has been working for a winery in California, medium-sized, for a few years now. She's been working in the HR department and has been recently promoted to HR manager. And so she has much experience in this area and has lots of knowledge to share with us.
Let's see.
Incredible.
Of course. I'm the new HR manager at Rombauer. It's a small winery in Napa Valley. And before my recent promotion, I worked in the HR department for a couple years after I graduated university. And I had a couple internships in HR departments as well at other companies before that. That's really question because an HR person is usually the first person someone will go to in the office if they start seeing signs of fraud. So it's really important that you respond properly and quickly and make sure to take action against improper behavior. Luckily, I've never encountered anything like that here in my 4 years at Rombauer, but at an internship when I was just out of school, one of the managers at in a different department, his wife was coming to visit, and I guess she had an interest in using one of the company cars, and he was going to have someone drive her around in it, and I felt that wasn't really appropriate. We just had a bunch of ethics trainings, and so I brought it up with my immediate supervisor, and he let another manager know, and because it seemed kind of something like it was similar to padding traveling expenses, so I just wanted to make sure that I said something rather than just letting it go. Mm-hmm. And my boss brought it up with the manager, but he got really defensive and filed a complaint about me. I actually just decided to keep my mouth shut, and his wife ended up using the car the whole weekend, and it did actually end up damaging my success in the company. So that's kind of an example of how it's difficult to play the ethical advocate, but it's generally the right thing to do. I think it's really kind of a cyclical pattern that people pick up from their superiors. For example, if an employee sees their boss having traveling expenses, to use an example that I've already talked about earlier, they're going to think that when they get to that position, that's something okay to do, and it's really not. So I think it's important to make sure that people receive consequences for doing unethical things early on, so that that's not a pattern that's created. Yeah, I don't really think a person is responsible. I think that all individuals in leadership positions have a responsibility of creating an ethical culture just around the office overall. Like I said earlier, because HR managers are usually the first to hear about any problems in the office, they can ensure that the problem doesn't grow into an office-wide issue or become more common. It's really important to focus on CSR and the idea that it is your responsibility to prevent fraud for the good of the company, customers, and society as a whole. I think that a major one is allowing people to behave unethically without repercussion, because it will spread, and employees will believe that it's accepted or even expected at a certain point, or in some cases. So it's really important to catch first signs before they get out of hand, and have people go home or change their behavior before it becomes part of a company culture.
Thank you, Hazel Tilinsky. And now back to Ellie.
To see what the men have to say about this interview.
Hello, we are back again with Jeffrey Skilling, Professor Antoine, and Mr. Topin to discuss the interview we just heard from Hazel Tilinsky, the HR manager at a winery in California. Now, gentlemen, would you say you're in agreement with Ms. Tilinsky?
No, I don't.
Mr. Skilling, can I ask why you're in a disagreement?
I think it places all of the blame on the bosses, which would assume that I'm guilty, but I'm not guilty. I had no knowledge about the fraud, so in my opinion, I'm not guilty.
I understand, but do you not agree that a company's culture is created top to bottom? So your employees were more likely to behave unethically based on unethical behavior they had seen in leadership positions like the CEO.
Yeah, sure, but that doesn't automatically mean that it is the top leader's fault. I barely had contact with lower employees, so I should not have been the person who took the most blame. There were people dealing directly with them and then reporting it to me, and I think they would be more responsible than me in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Skilling, for your interesting perspective. Now, I would like to hear your thoughts, Professor Antoine and Mr. Topin.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the fact that an ethical or unethical issue is totally contagious. In fact, an employee is much less likely to get involved in embezzlement if they think that there will be a punishment after that. But if they feel that it is accepted and they won't have any problem by doing that, they would not harm in getting involved in this type of activities to have personal gains on the side.
Yeah, that's very true. I also agree with your comment, like, that's why HR managers are not the only ones to blame for a culture of embezzlement. They are responsible for stopping the spread of the unethical behavior. If there is a lower level whistleblower, as there was at Enron, the HR manager are likely to be the first and the most informed about that kind of problem. Therefore, it's their responsibility to use that information to stop current fraud and prevent future fraud. The HR manager were likely too afraid of what would happen if they spoke up, as happened to Ms. Talensky in her last job. So they decided to ignore the warnings and indirectly help the cause of the fall of the Enron.
That is very true, Mr. Topham. The fear of losing one's job can make it much harder to have the courage to speak up against one's bosses, even if it is the right thing to do. Thank you again, gentlemen, for your time. I appreciate your help in understanding the Enron scandal and how it involved HR. And now, back to Caitlin and Deanna to conclude the show.
Thank you, Ellie. And now we all have a better understanding on HR management, ethics, and Enron scandal.
While HR managers were not completely to blame for the fraudulent culture at Enron, they were to blame for the lack of punishment of unethical behavior because they feared the loss of their jobs after questioning their superiors.
Thank you all for watching our ESDES Evening News on Enron Scandal. Have a good night and don't commit fraud. Straight after our evening news at ESDES, Jeffrey Skilling, CEO of Enron, is back in jail serving his sentence.